Hello everyone, in today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to turn this. So this is a test video, and hopefully you can see there's pauses here at the current moment, but after we use the script, what's going to happen is everything that has silence is going to be cut out, and you're going to be left with whatever actually has audio. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Into this. So this is a test video, and hopefully you can see there's pauses here at the current moment, but after we use the script, what's going to happen is everything that has silence is going to be cut out, and you're going to be left with whatever actually has audio. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So basically what I've created is a script that will automatically cut out any silent or low audio areas of your footage. So that way you can take a long interview or a raw video file for maybe a vlog or something, and this script will basically cut it down into the components you need in just a few seconds. So I've basically called this script auto jump cutter because that's pretty much what it does. You select a comp, a layer, set your padding, and you can run it to auto edit. And then you can input how many frames of padding you want, because sometimes if you don't have padding, the audio might be a bit choppy, so it's good to add some padding. And then you just have to run the script. So the basic way it works is you have a composition, and inside of that composition you have a layer. If you have an audio file that accompanies a video file like I did, just pre-compose them so you have your audio and your video, and then we can run it on our pre-composition in this case. Or you can just use a standard layer if you need to. If I take a look at the waveform, you can see we have these spikes where I'm actually talking here, and then if we zoom in you can see the rest is pretty low audio. So basically what we're going to do with this script is convert our audio to keyframes, and using that data we're going to set a threshold for the minimum amount of audio it needs for us to include it in the final video. So some parts of this script are pretty complicated, so if you're just here for a free script, the download link is in the description, but if you're here to learn how to create it, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up a new JavaScript file, and as usual I'm going to start off by typing in var project and setting it equal to app.project so we can reference our project. And then we're going to reference our active composition that we have selected. So I'll say comp equals project.activeItem. And of course we want to reference the layer we're going to be doing all of this to. So I'll just call a variable called layer, and I'll set it equal to comp and the first layer. And then we're going to set a var equal to threshold. And for now I'm just going to set this to 1. We're going to want to change this value based on how our audio is, but we'll take a look at that in a little bit. Let's go ahead and set up our UI really quick since that's just kind of redundant stuff. So I'll say main window equals new window. I'll make it a palette. I'll just call it auto jump cutter because that's essentially what it's doing, and undefined. I'll set the orientation of main window to column so everything goes from top to bottom. And I'll start off by creating a group called group1, which will be equal to our main window, and we're going to add a group with undefined values there, and I'll just call it group1. For group1, we're just going to add some static text. We don't need to create a variable for this, so I'm going to go ahead and say group1.add, and I'm going to add some static text, and these are going to basically be our instructions. So I'll just say select a comp and layer, set the padding, and run to auto. Okay, now I'm going to make that group we saw with the padding. So I'll create another group called group2. Set this again equal to main window.add. We're adding a group, undefined values, and we'll call it group2. Since we're going to have several elements in here, I'll go ahead and set up the orientation to be row so they go from left to right. And then I'm going to add some static text. Again, this static text isn't going to be changing, so we don't really need to set up a variable for it. So I'll just say group2.add static text. It'll be undefined, and we'll just call this padding in frames. And then we're going to go ahead and put in our inputs. So I'll create a variable called pad, and I'll set this equal to group2.add. I'm going to add an edit text box there with undefined values, and we'll just put the default as 5 frames. I'm also going to want to make the size a little bit bigger, so I'll just say inpad.size equals a toArray value. The input for this will require 2 arrays. So I'll just go ahead and say 60 width and 25 for height. And the last group we're going to create, we'll just say group 3 equals main window.add. And this is going to be where our button is located. So I'll define that, and I'll create a variable called button. And this is equal to our third group, and we're going to be adding a button with undefined parameters there, and we'll just say go. And finally, we just need to show our window. So first I'll grab main window and I'll center it, and then I'll grab main window and show it. So if I go ahead and run the script, select a comp and click on play, you can see it looks just the same as it did before. Super simple UI, but most of the hard work is done by the code. So the only initialization required by the script is our button. So when we click our button, button.onClick equals a function. Inside of this function of our onClick, we're going to be having 2 other functions we go into. So we'll start off by saying app.begin undo group, and we'll just call this auto editing. And we'll also make an app.end undo group so we can redo all of our changes if necessary. And after we click on our button, what's the first thing we want to do? Well, we probably want to convert our audio to keyframes first. So we're going to create a function called convert audio, and we're referencing it right here. So let's go ahead and go down here and create that function. It's going to be super simple. We're just going to say function convert audio. And inside of this function, we're just going to say app.execute command. And we're going to say app.find menu command ID convert audio to keyframes. Now I believe this code is only compatible with Adobe After Effects CS6 and above. Basically what it's doing is it's going to execute a command. I'll post a link of all the commands that are in After Effects below, but you can basically type in a number after app.execute command and it will run any number of different commands that are in here, like a new composition, add to render queue, and things like that. But since we don't know the actual command for convert audio to keyframes and we don't want to look it up, we can actually say app.find menu command, and this little function right here will return the numerical command, which will work properly with execute command. So if we go ahead and run our script, I'm just going to click on go, and it's going to convert the audio to keyframes. So you can see we now have our null object, and if we go down and click on U, it's going to bring up all of the keyframes it's created. It creates a left channel, a right channel, and both channels for our audio, but what we're going to be doing is referencing both channels because that's the more generalized audio levels. So later when we refer to this, we're going to be grabbing the both channels and the slider effect that is associated with it. Just so we can visualize this, I'm going to select my slider for both channels, and we're going to click on the graph editor, and this will bring up all of the keyframes in graph form. So if I zoom in here, you can see all of these kind of silent areas are anywhere from about 0.5 and below. The problem is it's not using decibels, it's just using standard units. So basically our threshold that we already set as 1 is equal to when the unit is equal to 1. Of course, this is going to change depending on your audio. Some clips will have louder ambient noise, so you might want to increase your threshold in those cases. So now we basically need to grab all of this data and store it into an array. But what we're going to be doing is storing it in 2 arrays. One of them is going to store all of the times for the keyframes, and the other is going to store the actual value of the keyframes. So inside of our button.onClick, the next function we're going to initialize is going to be called calculate keys. Inside of calculate keys, we're going to be returning 2 different values, our key times and our key values, which are going to be 2 arrays. So basically what we're going to do is set a variable, I'm just going to call it key info, equal to this function. So basically key info is going to have 2 values. The first value is going to be the keyframe times, and the second value is going to be the keyframe values. So let's go ahead and set up our function called calculate keys. Function calculate keys. The first thing we're going to do is create our arrays to store all of the information. So I'll create an array called key times. I'll create one called key values. And I'm also going to want to get the layer that has all of our keyframes. So I'll create a variable called audio layer. And since when we convert the audio to keyframes, it goes on top, we're just going to reference comp.layer1. And we're also going to reference our slider control for both channels. So I'll just say var slider equals our audio layer. And we're going into the effects, and our effect is called both channels. And we're grabbing the value called slider, which is actually keyframes. Now we'll go ahead and create a for loop so we can store all of the information into these arrays. So I'll just say var I equals 1 for I is less than or equal to our slider dot number of keys. We're going to increment by 1. So this is going to basically be the number of keyframes in our slider. So for each time it goes through this, we'll grab key times and we'll push something, and we'll grab key values and we'll push something there as well. For key times, I'm going to reference our slider effect, and I'm going to say key time I. And for key values, I'll reference our slider.keyValue I. And that will basically really quickly push all of those into the arrays for us. Slider.keyTime will return each time, and slider.keyValue will return each value. And after we've done that, we can get rid of our audio layer. So I'll grab audio layer and I'll call remove. And we're going to return a couple of values now. So whenever we want to return multiple values, we just put in return and brackets. And we're going to return key times and key values. So now up here, if I called, say, key info value 0, it's going to return our key times. If I called key info value 1, it's going to give us our key values. So after we've done our calculate keys, our final function is one called edit video. So I'll go ahead and say edit video, and there's our function there. And to edit our video, we're going to want to pass through our key info. So we need to pass through our key times and key values. So I'll say key info 0 and key info 1. So that way we can pass those variables into our edit video function. So I'll go down here and create a function called edit video. And we also need to bring in our arguments. I'm just going to call them the same thing for simplicity purposes. So key times and key values. And now the code's about to get a little bit complicated and messy. So let's just dive straight into it, and I'll do my best to explain it to you guys. So inside of our edit video function, what is our goal? Well, we want to basically parse the data from our arrays that we're inputting, our key times and key values, and we need to basically get the in and out points of each clip of video that has audio on it. So for example, this clip right here, I have this little section of audio that I'm going to want to get. So we need to basically get the in time of when the audio starts and goes above a certain threshold, and we also need the out point so that we can cut it at the end. I'll go ahead and zoom in here a bit so you can see the code a little bit better. And we'll go ahead and create a variable called in and out times, because like I was saying, we need to actually get the in and out times, and I'll make it equal to a new array. Basically what our goal is for in and out times is to have every odd index be the in times and every even index be the out. So value 0 could be 0 seconds, and maybe index 1 would be 5 seconds, and that would be a chunk of audio. We're going to set up a few other variables. We'll create one called isRun, and this is going to be a bool which we'll set to false. And this is going to basically be, is it currently running on a section of audio that we need? I'll also create a counter variable which I'll set equal to 0. And I'm also going to have one called padding, which I'm going to set to parse int. And we're going to basically be parsing the UI element for it, which is pad. And we're going to parse the text. So we're going to parse int for pad.text. So by default, that's 5. Now we're going to go down the rabbit hole and program some crazy logic. So we'll start off with a for loop. And for this for loop, we'll just say var I equals 0. For I is less than our key times dot length. You can use key values as well. They are the same length. I++. The first thing we want to check, is it not running? So we'll say if is not is run. So basically if is run is false, which it is by default, go into this code here. So once we're inside, we're going to say if our key values and the index I is greater than or equal to our threshold, which we set up earlier, then we know that the current keyframe is above our threshold, and we're probably going to want that. The first thing we'll do is we'll say is run equals true, because it is indeed running and it's at a point where we need the audio. And then we're going to put yet another if statement. And inside of here, we're going to say if key values value I minus padding is greater than or equal to 0, then we're going to get the in and out times, and we're going to grab the length of in and out times, and we're going to set that equal to our key times I minus padding. So basically what this is saying is if the current keyframe value it's on is greater than the threshold, we are running through some areas that we need. Then we'll say if our key value that we were on minus the padding amount, because basically it creates a keyframe every frame. So if you had the padding as 5, I minus 5, if that's greater than 0, then we want to store in, for in and out times, we want to store that keyframe with our padding. I know it's a little bit confusing, so take a look at this diagram. So basically we have this graph of values. This keyframe that I have highlighted is a value of 1.05 units. Well, this is above our threshold, and this is an indication that our audio is starting and we should probably get the in point for it. But because we have padding, we need to check if the number of frames that we've set for padding, we need to basically check if they are okay to include inside of the footage. Because say for example you are on frame 1 and it just happened to be above the threshold. Well, if you go back from frame 1 minus 5, you're at -4. Well, that's not really compatible with any logic. So basically what we did inside of our code is if we said, if that -4 is greater than 0, then yeah, we want to store the value. But if it's not, we're going to want to set it to 0. So I'm going to put in an else statement here. And inside of our else, we'll set in and out times. Again, the length of in and out times for the index is going to be equal to key times 0. It still may be a little bit complicated, but hopefully that makes sense. So we've basically set up everything for if the audio is above the threshold, but now we need to make an else contra this is not running. So I'll go ahead and go down here and make another else. And inside of here, we're going to say if key values index I is less than our threshold, then what do we want to do? Well, first we're going to want to get our counter and increment it up by 1. This is basically going to give us the number of total clips with audio we have. And underneath that, we're going to say if our counter is greater than or equal to our padding amount, then isRun should be false, our counter should be set to 0, and our in and out times, index in and out times dot length, should be equal to key times I minus 1. So basically, if it's going through all this code and it is running, it's going to check if our current keyframe value is less than the threshold. And if it is, we're going to increment our counter by 1. And if at any point our counter is greater than or equal to our padding, so 5 in this case, we're going to set isRunning to false, our counter to 0. And for our in and out times for the current index, we're going to put in our key times index I minus 1. And we just have one more argument kind of thing to put in here. We'll say what if the key values is greater than the threshold? So if key values index I is greater than or equal to our threshold, then we're just going to set the counter to 0. Alright, so that's pretty much it for that chunk of code and all the complicated things of processing that array of keyframes and values and all that. So now we can move on to the actually fun stuff, which is editing our video. All of this code right here basically doesn't do anything inside of After Effects. It's basically giving us the in and out points that we can now use to cut and move around our videos to edit them. So I can go ahead and get out of this for loop here, and we're going to create, you guessed it, another for loop. So for this for loop, I'll just say var e equals 0 for e is less than our in and out times dot length. We're going to increment e by 2. The reason we're incrementing by 2 is because, like I previously said, any odd index is going to be our in points and any even index is going to be our out points. So we're going to increment by 2, and you'll see how that works in a sec. We're going to create a var called current layer because we're going to have a bunch of different layers in this case. And we're going to say layer.duplicate. We're basically going to duplicate our original layer as many times as we need. So in this case, we would have approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different layers, but that will also depend on your threshold. So after we've got our current layer, which is our duplicated layer, we're going to say current layer dot inPoint, and we're also going to say current layer dot outPoint. So now we're actually getting to something where we're cutting our footage up. For our endpoint, we're going to set that to our in and out times index e, and for our out point, we're going to grab in and out times index e plus 1. So let's go ahead and run this really quick here. Got my layers here, and I'll go ahead and run it. And you can see now we have this kind of amalgamated mess of layers, and they're not sequenced or anything, and we still have a full-length layer at the bottom, which is our original layer. So now we need to kind of organize these with some code. So we'll go ahead and get out of this for loop, and the first thing we're going to do is remove our original layer, which we defined all the way at the top. So we're going to say layer.remove, and now we're going to set up a for loop to go through each layer and sequentially place them in properly edited form. So I'll create a variable called start time, and I'll set that equal to 0 because the original start time is 0 seconds. Then we'll go ahead and create our final for loop for this script. I'll just say var z equals 1. For z is less than or equal to our comp.numLayers, so the number of layers in our composition, increment z by 1. And just kind of like before, we're going to set up a current layer, but this time we'll call it this layer, and that's going to be equal to comp.layerz. So it's going to go from layer 1, 2, 3 all the way down the line. And just for organizational purposes, I'll call this layer, and I'm going to set the name equal to our index. So layer 1 will be called 1, layer 2 will be called 2, etc. And now we can do our editing. So I'm going to grab this layer and the start time, and I'm going to set this equal to the start time that we previously defined here minus this layer dot endpoint. And then I'm going to say start time equals this layer dot outpoint. So basically what this is doing is it's grabbing the current layer it's created, it's then setting the name to our current index it's on. The start time is basically where the layer comes in. If I trimmed this like this, the start time is the same. The endpoint has now changed, but the start time remains the same. So in order to offset things properly, we basically need to subtract the endpoint minus the start time, which will move the entire layer backwards and link it up with the proper time. And then we're saying the new start time for the next iteration is going to be set to our layer.outPoint, basically when the clip ends. And we'll go ahead and go outside of this for loop and do a couple more things. We'll grab our comp, and we're going to grab the work area duration because we are cutting these clips up quite a bit. So the work area is going to be a lot shorter than it was before. So I'll grab the work area duration. We'll set it equal to our comp.layer. And for the index of our layer, I'll say comp.numLayers.outPoint. Basically what this is going to do is say how many layers are in this composition. Okay, maybe there's 7. And the 7th layer is going to be the final layer the way this is organized. So I'm going to grab the outpoint of the final layer in the sequence and set that equal to the work area duration. And finally, I'm going to trim the comp to the work area. I'm going to use this same kind of code right here. So I'll copy my execute command, paste it there. And instead of convert audio to keyframes, I'll say trim comp to work area. All right, there's this one more thing we need to do. We'll go back into our button.onClick, and below edit video, I'm just going to alert so we know that it completed successfully. So say completed and success. So we've written 100 lines of code. Let's see how well this works. So I'll run the script, and I'll say maybe 10 frames of padding here. Click on go. And just like that, it says it's completed. You can see we have all of our clips properly sequenced. And if I pull up the audio here, you can see they're cut perfectly for when there's audio. So I know that was a lot of complicated code inside of this edit video function, but hopefully you got the gist of it. And if you don't really understand it, feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to explain it to you. But of course you can download it for free in the description below if you just want to use the script. And all you need to do is modify your threshold and you can get awesome results in seconds. I've tested this on a 30-minute video and it instantly edited it in about 5 seconds. But yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's how you create a script that automatically cuts out the low volume parts of your video and edits them instantly for you. As always, be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, leave any comments if you have any questions or future tutorial requests, and of course don't forget to subscribe to be notified when the weekly videos come out. But that is it for today. I will see you guys in the next one.